don't know what that was about. I don't know why it didn't put my name down.
Okay. All right.
Oh, maybe my Zoom is not working properly. I closed all the apps too. Oh, but you said the link was something wrong with the link.
Yeah, maybe that was it. The time was set up for later, so.
Uh huh.
Um, so it's been actually almost exactly a month since I last saw you,
Okay.
and you weren't able to open any of the links I sent.
No. Well, I hope they went to Zoom and it said waiting for host or whatever, and you never came. So
Okay, so what's been going on since I last saw you?
um uh, um
I can remind you at the time when I last spoke to you, you were talking about kind of the study that you were doing about that was being shared by this fellow who was talking about what the Bible says and this how you can change your kind of accept and be able to perceive what is actually happening, but then have a vision for how you would want it to be different, and then opening yourself up to the possibility that things might change, perhaps something like that.
okay, I don't recall what I was talking about.
Well, you basically hit a wall when you got off the gabapentin and you
Yeah.
moved through it, and it worked. And at the time, you were able to get off of it without any kind of major repercussions.
Oh, right. Oh man, yeah. So I went that day was that day was uh, well, I think it was the day before, maybe, or within a few days. I had had an accident with my pill times, and had skipped a few, and I had relatively little side effects from it compared with what I might have otherwise. And yeah, it was willpower, it was faith, it was prayer, but I wasn't quite ready to go through with it. And plus the doctor called, and the forces around me, people and influences, make it difficult to do something like that, like a pure act of faith, where you
I see.
basically defy reason. So,
Yeah.
uh, not always safe to do either. So, but
I'm gonna record. I'm gonna record.
okay.
Keep going.
So yeah,
Recording in progress.
I
Influences around you made it difficult to continue staying off the gabapentin. Is that
well,
what I'm hearing?
they would make it difficult for me to like abruptly just stop, and nobody around me would support that decision. Although I have come close to it many times, when I take the pills, it's so sometimes it can be such a source of pain that
You've mentioned that many times.
yeah, I don't take them. I still don't know what's going on. It's really it's
So when I spoke to you, you were off of them and you were exhilarated and
no,
feeling good.
oh, okay. No, I wasn't off of them completely. I had gotten off of them for I skipped two doses, and then I went back to my taking them again because I got frightened of just quitting like that, of going long term and what it might mean. Although I might have been able to do it, I don't know. I now sometimes wonder, but because going back hasn't been exactly good for me either. I went back, but at a lesser dose, and then I've been going at that lesser dose since. I had a couple of days where I got it was so bad that I went back up again, but then realized that that wasn't helping me. It seems like if I go up at all, at this point, I suffer a lot of psychological problems. Like I
Okay.
become very unstable and despondent, I would say.
All right.
I can have, bouts of just, despondency and not thinking right. Uh, I mean, from one point of view, it's thinking right, So we're discovering is like, you can, hold on, I'm gonna get a drink of water. You can, yeah, you can, you can, with regards to pain, and I guess pain is a very complex thing, but with regards to it, in my position, I can either state, I'm in pain, I'm, just it's basically repetitive verbal, speaking. Because if I just tell my caregivers and everybody that's here, my dad, whoever, the nurses, whoever I encounter that has to do with my health, you know, something that's quote unquote matter of fact, like, oh, this is the number equivalent to what my pain is, this is where it is, this is the description of it, this is what I could be just talking about that all the time. That's not productive to anything. Especially because I think somehow this drug has, I hesitate to say insidiously because a drug is not necessarily insidious, but the way it's functioned is it has attached itself to part of my thinking that whenever I get
Oh, but hold on, maybe also though the experience of pain and the complexity of the experience of pain is so difficult that it's hard not to associate one experience with the other. So in other words, associate not being on gabapentin with suffering, increased suffering, and that idea of it can cause fear, and as a result, that's how you end up continuing to take it. You don't know, you're not guaranteed that you're going to feel better if you get off of it permanently, for example.
It's more, for me, it's more the fear of the reprisal of the drug and against my system. Yeah, so by insidious, I mean to say that I'm not fully understood the function of it because it's hard. I don't even know if the medical chemistry community understands the function of it, but what I'm realizing from my own struggle with this is that it somehow, because I can feel the immediate result of and I guess other people can too. Stress causes many people sleepless nights, but stress for me is, somehow connected with these nerve sensations. In any case, what I was trying to get at is that saying it over and over again is really counterproductive. Because it's just like, I don't know, it's like putting another layer of paint on an already, damaged object. I don't know, maybe that's a bad analogy, but you're not really helping to improve the situation because I'm not really fully understood of this yet, but this is what I'm going toward, because being just sort of giving into it is not going to help me in any way. So yeah, it the reason I keep hesitating, it does affect my short-term memory very drastically when it's severe, and speaking about it right now is you know, activating my legs. Plus, I got to do the bowel care, so that's probably giving me a little bit of discomfort right now in my legs. But
Okay, what do you want to talk about?
I wanted to talk about yeah, I just what's happened. The first question you asked. Since then, the new year was a little bit stressful because of the scheduling, caregiving scheduling, and but I made a little bit of I don't know, maybe a misstep when I have one of my caregivers who's responsible for the scheduling, and I kind of panicked when I had a lot of pain, and I scheduled someone else, and I canceled. There was one person that was leaving at the end of the year, and she was really nice, but she had this thing where she worried a lot. She was always like worrying that something needed to be done, so it made it hard for me to sleep at night. And she talked to herself a lot when she was doing things, so I would hear her like, "Okay, is that okay? Okay," like whispering, and I couldn't really sleep with that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And then, so, and there was another person that I had just sort of recruited, and he was available on the nights, and I didn't know how long more he would. It's hard to get somebody at night like that for the night, so I didn't know. I didn't want to let him find another job because I had put him off for a while. So I canceled her, and I gave him the job just kind of on short notice, because she had maybe 2 or 3 shifts left on her job, and I felt really bad about it. It kind of messed up my, it affected the pain in my legs a lot there. But it all ironed itself out, and I think I was becoming over thoughtful about different things regarding scheduling, and
Over thoughtful in what way?
regarding scheduling, sometimes when my legs are really having a lot of trouble, I have a preference for one of the caregivers over the other, or over another, and that can be a little bit of a troublesome, because if they have a shift, if I want to change the shift because I'm having a really bad day, then I want the person who's more sort of familiar with all the care, then the other person's not so happy that I took a shift away. So I have to be careful about that. Other than that, the new year has come along, and today was payday, by the way, and I did it, and I was really happy with. Every payday, it seems I'm a little bit less stressed. So.
Okay, and what is the meaning of that? What it is it about every payday being a little less stressful? Or every payday you're becoming a little less stressed?
It means that I'm getting control of everything's becoming more manageable. I'm slightly fewer employees, the hours are more understandable. Someone's taking care of the scheduling. My bank balance is sufficient to pay everyone on time. I still worry more. This is my biggest sort of cause of
Stress.
yeah, it's just sometimes the pain is so high. I wonder if I can manage. So on a day like today, it just happened that I was managing it, but it didn't just happen. There are reasons. I don't want to get all into it because it's going to sound religious to you, but because it has to do with God and
But what do you fear about my perception about what you
well, I don't
get
fear.
into thinking about?
That's a good question. It's not so much that I fear it, it's just that I don't want to step into a realm that's not really like quote unquote scientific. You know, it's a realm of.
Is that something you fear for yourself?
No, I just fear it because it's sort of a professional setting. I'm not, I guess I can say anything I want here.
Yeah,
That's true.
and I think it's so important to be really truthful and honest about what you're thinking about, because that really, first of all, serves the purpose of you being able to air those thoughts
Articulate,
and actually,
yeah.
yeah, and I can reflect things back, and from my perspective, just to be really honest with you, I'm not entirely, I work in similar ways personally. I don't have any specific faiths, but I believe that the way one thinks is important, and it is a way of influence. It's a way that we work with ourselves and negotiate our lives on a daily basis. So I think it's entirely
Yeah, it is
legit.
good. It is good to be able
Yeah.
to do that, and thank you. Okay. Well, I'll try to articulate it. Articulating is a little difficult because it's something that I'm processing from day to day, one day at a time. It has to do with listening to certain teachers online. They teach the Bible pretty much, and I've had to the last couple of years. I've had to sort of. I was raised like strict Hindu, okay. So as a strict Hindu, not only were we required to do these daily rituals, like singing, dancing, repeating mantras over and over again, things like that, but we also had to listen to hours of lectures on their scripture, on the Hindu scripture, like the Sanskrit and
Yeah.
the translation, and then the purport, what they call the purport, somebody's diatribe about what it means. I soon became very I would sit through those, and questions that I had, I knew I was not supposed to ask. So that turned me off right there. I was a logical thinker. I noticed that the talk speakers would repeat themselves endlessly, saying the same things, expecting the people around to like just absorb it. And I would look around and see people falling asleep, and see it was like there was no energy there. And I soon just looked forward to those things to try to hide somewhere and fall asleep, or just get through it as best I could, because it was so boring. But I did listen, and I did pay attention, and I thought some of the stuff made some sense. Many of the stories did not make sense. Like historically, I was very curious about, but I did believe it because I was living in India. The place was said to be 5,000 years old where I was living. The stories were said to be that old. I had my doubts because as I got older, like I don't know, I wasn't that young when I started thinking about it. I thought, well, how is this building still sitting here from 5,000 years ago? Like, and there was like, oh, this temple was, here when, so-and-so was here, and then, as I got older, I still, the parts of the philosophy, or the Hindu philosophy that have to do with the nature of reality, like the Bhagavad Gita and the Puranas and Upanishads. They're like these books that a lot of Western scholars have also studied to get an idea, and I can kind of try to describe the Hindu.
Well, I
way.
don't think, well, you can if you want. But
No,
I
not the Hindu, but the way I had come to view God was, as an Indian, first of all, which made me, right there was a weird feeling, because I thought God should be like not just Indian, because that made Indians superior, and I wasn't Indian, so I thought, I'll never. They had a word. It was called mlechas and yavanas. That was untouchables and demons, and that was how they referred to white people, or anybody that was anybody that was. So I'm a mlecha, I suppose. So these were very old ideas from like the ancient Hindu text, right? So at one time in the past, maybe they had these thoughts, but the teacher that was teaching, his followers that my parents joined, was like super orthodox. So he was like wanted to bring back the old days. He wanted to bring back the old Hindu, right, ways of thinking, and I suppose you're redeemed by surrendering, and the ideas of God are not so dissimilar from the ones in the Bible, except, like I said, you have God, you have God and gods appearing in India as people doing various things. So then what I started to wonder about was, you just have to accept that this person was God. And then they tell you the story. Like, for instance, there's elements in the story that just don't make any sense. Like, he married 16,000 wives, and he incarnated himself into 16,000 different people so that he could live individually with each wife, right? So this was all, we were supposed to believe that. And I'm here, even as a 7 or 8 year old going, okay, like, I have questions. You know what I'm saying? I have questions. But you couldn't ask any questions. It was just a stated fact. That was a stated fact. And there was other stories about, and just to accept the supernatural nature of this being, or this person that you were supposed to accept as God. And so in my mind, I was like, okay, it's kind of like, and I noticed also when I started looking into it that other places had the same gods, but with different features or different story. The story was different, the story of their background, and also like the priority of gods. Like, one place would prioritize one god much above. They basically would hold the place of the other god in another place, right? So they would have the same gods, but in one province, one god would be held at the top, and in another province, another god would be held at the top. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
the story would be slightly different, which would support that version of how they saw things. And in Hinduism, that's kind of okay, because all the gods do whatever they want anyway, and who knows? Maybe they did it differently, and we just, they just have this way of not really asking deep questions about history, right? Just ignoring things, and I didn't have a mind like that. It didn't work very well because we were supposed to surrender to this person that was our guru, and then he was supposed to give us a new name, and we would do some vows in front of it, and it all just didn't make any sense to me. I didn't want somebody to give me a new name. I didn't want to take any vows. I didn't want to put my surrender to a stranger. And none of it sounded at all appealing to me.
How old were you at the time when this continued to happen?
All through my teenage years, there were some kids that got initiated, and they got perks, like they would get fed first. You would get to, wake up later. There was all kinds of things that when you got initiated and you got your name, and it would give you status. But it wasn't enough for me to compromise what I did compromise myself, very much so. Now I'm realizing it years later. I never realized, like what you're saying, by withholding my tongue and not speaking. I'm just realizing that more and more, that I didn't really learn how to say what was on my mind, because I was always just trying to hide a little bit, right? And trying to not hide, but stay, not be the peg that got smashed with the hammer, or that's one way of putting it. Not be the one that stood out, right? So one of the nurses was here today, really nice one. And she asked me, how did you get injured, by the way? And then I went through the whole story with her, and she was like, oh, that's so sad. And she was like, where were your parents and all this? And I was like, oh, don't even ask. That's another story. So, yeah.
So this was in your teen years, okay, so you really were trained to keep it all in and to work it out in your own mind.
Yeah, I just knew that I didn't want to give up. I didn't know why, but I didn't want anybody controlling me like that, and
You experienced that from a very young age.
very young. The time I was 4 years old, I was put into the ashram. From living with my parents, albeit in a simple place, but with them. So to suddenly, it was a church basement, a big church in Dallas. They still have the property, and the building is still there. That big ugly building. That it was in the church basement with a bunch, like maybe 20, 30 other little kids, ranging from 4 to like 14 or 15 or even 20 maybe. I can't remember. I was one of the smallest, littlest, tykes there. And and then suddenly I was alone with a bunch of strangers that I didn't know, and I didn't. I didn't.
So so you've described all this. How does this feed into kind of what you're thinking about right now, which is what you were going to talk about?
Yeah, God. That's I was talking about the God that we were raised with, and the God of the Bible, the God that I'm not the Old Testament, but the New Testament. Okay, and it's the same God, but it's just that he's described in a slightly different manner. That what it says is that and it is, I think it's Ezekiel or something like that, where it says that I will give you.
So hold on, you equate now at this point in your life, you believe now that all gods are the same God, but they're just interpreted by the heads of churches in different ways.
No, that's not it at all. I think that there's one God, and it is slightly what you said, but the problem is that all the gods that say are within Hinduism are are the description of them is you have to go by the nature of the god. So if you're worshiping a god, uh, it could be made up in your mind, but it becomes real to you. So it becomes an agreement that you make with this entity, spiritual, imagined, whatever you want to call it. You make an agreement, and that's how the Bible describes it, as a covenant. So you make an agreement with this, with this, with this entity, and then it kind of controls your behavior. From that point on, you do things with that entity in mind for one reason or another, and then depending on the nature of that entity, your behavior adapts accordingly. So over time, depending on whether, so say you worship Krishna, okay, that's the Hindu god. He doesn't really he doesn't really care individually about you. He might, if he wants to, but it's not in his nature. It's in his nature to just be the ruler of everything, or to be like somebody that, and he's probably one of the more sort of playful gods in the Hindu, and then so you make certain agreements. You make agreements to serve him, for instance, and then you make agreements to make certain ritual offerings, and then you make agreements to recognize certain ritual dates of appearance, disappearance, different things like that, different relational holidays, and then you have like thousands of gods, and they're all related to one another depending, like I said, on which part of India you come from and what type of Hinduism is there. It could be a completely different version of the same god. Like in northern India, Shiva, for instance, is very popular. And many parts of Hinduism consider Shiva to be above Krishna, for instance. But in the part of India where I came from, Krishna is considered above Shiva, okay? But they generally coincide because, the gods they're all friendly and they're interchangeable with one another. You know, they respect one another. They have some kind of relationship bond, right? But they're all Hindu gods. And then, so you make these agreements, and then it affects your entire life. Your entire life, you're beholden to these rituals and these habits that you get into, that you have to do to recognize the not only the characteristics of the god, like say Ganesh, Shiva, Parvati, Sita, Rama, Varaha. Then they have demons, like so many demons, right? And you have to, once you learn all the stories, all of these different characters have relationship with you in your mind. I'm not going to say you have a relationship with them, but the Bible would say that you actually do have a relationship with them, whether they're real. It's
maybe you relate to the stories in some way.
No, you make agreements to behave and act in certain ways, and you get trapped into those agreements.
Yeah, well, you only agree if you agree. You didn't agree.
Right, but I was supposed to. Every attempt was made to make me agree. Mm-hmm. Everybody else many of the other kids, and I agreed, but it was under duress. For some things I agreed, but it wasn't with my reasonable consent. And
but isn't it possible the other kids who, let's say, had got initiated weren't necessarily agreeing, they were just on the surface agreeing so that they could, sleep
Absolutely,
over
so they could get more food, and it was a
Yeah.
good reason, and I didn't hold it against them. I just
Yeah.
couldn't do that myself. Some of them
Okay.
even became sexual slaves just to get better food, you know? Yeah.
So is it, so in your case, what is that, so it's almost like every human who's raised within within Hinduism, just as one example, ends up having a very unique and different experience with that religion, depending on them as a person and depending on how they think about the religion and how devoted they are and how much they might live two lives just performing in one way and thinking complete other things. But in your case, you weren't willing to go there.
Yeah, and Hinduism is also flexible, in their society is because you can still be Hindu and be atheist as well. There's different like there's idea of oneness of everything. There's an idea of just pure nothing. There's all these ancient philosophies, let's say, and one of them has to do with the Vaishnav philosophy, which is the one that we were raised with, and it has to do with worshiping the deity Vishnu or Krishna. They're synonymous. Well, actually, they're not because they have different behaviors, but they don't. There was always some stories amongst them that were just weird, that didn't strike me as godly, and I was like, okay, that guy's. I don't like that. Like Krishna, for instance, one time when he was a kid, it wasn't necessarily that I held it against him. It just made me not necessarily want to worship him. And then the answer to that was, well, you don't understand. Worship him anyway. You're being rebellious, And that wasn't really. I was like, okay, thank you. Okay, I'll just keep my opinions to myself, But for instance, one story was, he was a kid and a bunch of local village girls were swimming in the water, and he went and took all their clothes and then climbed up a tree and then made them come out of the water to get their clothes, right? And that was supposed to be, oh, silly. It was, but at the same time, we were supposed to believe that we were going to be celibate and this, that doing these, sexual was sin. You couldn't talk about it. You couldn't think about it. You couldn't. So then I'm thinking, why would he do that? What's the nature of that? But you couldn't mention that. Nobody would dare to mention why he would do that. And as a logical teenager, I'm like, well, it makes sense to me. It's not really a good thing to do. I don't think their parents would approve. The girl's parents, you know what I'm saying? So then, and there was other stories like that just, I'm like, he's
They weren't aligned. So stories that were being told about these gods that weren't aligned with the values that you were being taught. Is that?
That's a fair thing to say, for sure. Yeah, and you just were not allowed to talk. Like there were certain sections of the scriptures that were said to be purely about the sort of sexual exploits of this god, and they were kept out, and they were said to be only understandable by advanced scholars or whatever, members of the cult. Yeah,
Right.
like
But it sounded like if as long as you're age appropriate and you're male, you get privilege in this.
I'm not sure yeah, exactly. I'm not sure. I never went into that, but it always struck me as like these celibate men have access to these stories, and what are they? And all I knew was also that it was uniquely Indian stories, and I wasn't Indian, so saying that all these Indian characters were gods was okay with me, and was okay for these Indian people, but I was uprooted. I didn't know where I came from, and I didn't want to just adopt Hinduism in the Indian culture because it didn't make sense to me that everything was just India. all the stories were just India. It never, and it didn't make sense to me. Like, so that the whole of Europe and everywhere else were just barbarians, basically, and
So how is this leading into your own study right now of
well,
Christianity?
just mainly with when it has to do with God. Okay, so for a long time, after that, after I left, I was satisfied to conclude that my relationship with those gods, namely, the gods that I just mentioned, was, an enigma, let's say, because I wasn't willing to let go of thinking that I was favored by the gods, because after all, I was born into that group, and even though it had been a bad experience, there must be some purpose to it, and the gods must have a special place, because in Hinduism there's a difference. There's this idea called tapasya. I think I might have mentioned it to you before. It's called it means austerity, and they so much stress on this idea that the more suffering you go through, it's like God sometimes puts you in suffering to
Yeah,
make.
That's not even just in the context of religion. Anybody who experiences suffering, there's always the things that we learn as a result of our suffering and being broken, and 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 how what we come out, after we've coped with the loss and the pain, and there's things that come from that, but so not just in the context of religion, but anyway, yes, you're telling me that in the context, the more you suffer.
Well, I wanted to believe that it was for that.
For a reason.
Yeah, that somehow in the end of it, I would still have the God would be like, I would be his man. I would be his, I would be favored. I would be like chosen. So all these other people, even though I didn't follow the rules, and somehow I found some quote in there that said all you need to do is, blah blah blah, and I was okay with that. So I kept the relationship, you could say, with the gods, even though, or the main God anyway, with the God that we were raised with as this particular sect of Hinduism. I kept on thinking, and then after, when I hit that wall like a few years ago and started having pain, and well, as I left, sorry, I missed a part. As I left, no, I guess I tried to explain it, but just to clarify, I had a slight, I don't say relationship, but it was like I didn't pray. There was a time, okay, after I told you the story about how I sort of broke up with my wife. Did I tell you? With my daughter falling on the floor.
You
After,
haven't told me the details, no.
oh, she silly. Now when I think back on it, how silly I was, or I behaved, let's say. I had a beautiful wife. She was from a really good family, and she loved me, and we had a daughter. And I didn't have a lot to offer other than my brains and my determination. But we were doing okay, and we would have probably done okay for ourselves, But I just quit. The thing hit me, and then afterwards, it hit me because I was so fixated on the idea that that the God had the purpose of me miraculously walking again, or it wasn't even miraculously. I just didn't think that this break would stay. I thought that within a few years, it would it would heal up, and then I would start to get my function back, right? So I was waiting and waiting and waiting, and then that incident kind of broke me and made me realize that I wasn't gonna walk again. I wasn't gonna. So I wasn't capable of handling that on my own, and I didn't have either of my parents to talk to at the time. They were both I didn't know where my dad was, and my mom was like downright like mean to me at that time because I wasn't in the cult, right? And because I was choosing to live my life just in a normal way, like a secular way, outside. And so I didn't have support, and I just went into like a shell where I cried and I talked to this God for like 5-6 years, literally, just staying in the house there. And seeing my daughter on the weekends, I basically kicked her out, my wife. I didn't kick her out, but I was either going to move out or she was going to move out. And I first moved out, and then when she moved, went somewhere else, I moved back into the house. And then, but it wasn't the happiest of times. I just wanted to be near my daughter because she was still living near there, right? In Pennsylvania.
Where were you?
In Pennsylvania,
Okay.
central Pennsylvania. And then, yeah, I just prayed and begged and that kind of thing for a long time. Yeah, for a long time. No, it was more like, just why, and I was just so depressed and down and begging, for a miracle, for trying to get feeling back, trying to get control back, reading like other books about like the different spiritual Native American ideas, Hawaiian type of spirituality, all these different types of ways of magic, like that people used to do in the old times, where it was like these agreements that I'm telling you with gods, but you make agreements with forces in nature, and then I don't know, one can believe it or not believe it, but if you cultivate, according to those theories, if you cultivate relationships with these forces, you can begin to have either an acute awareness of things that most people are not aware of, or an acute control of things that most people are not in control of. But you have to follow, you have to be in these agreements, right? These various, so there's agreements, with, that have to do with worship, others that have to do, that are pretty, pretty factual in terms of like plants. Like say, they have a whole assortment of perspectives on different plants and their spiritual nature, and some of it is very true because it affects your health, probably through some chemical process, but in their way of seeing it, there's a more spiritual component to it, that you learn to relate to the particular spirit of that plant, what have you. That's just one example of some.
Can I ask you, how old were you at this time?
I was like 19, 20. I was going to university.
You were already married and having a child? At what
Yeah.
age?
20, 21.
You married at 21?
Yeah.
And how, because, it's kind of strange in my view, my limited view, we haven't really talked about, you know, kind of the basic circumstances of your life, and
Yeah.
I've never heard about your accident and what happened.
Yeah, yeah.
And, that, like, it's like we've been skirting around all these different things, but there's also been the pain that you've been experiencing and some of the physical things
Yeah.
that have gotten in the way for you in our sessions, but there's also you and me, and like, there's just so much. But anyway, I don't want to get off topic because we just have a very limited time right now, and I have a.
That's right. Yeah.
We're supposed to finish at 2:30, and I
That's
need
right.
to finish away at 4:44 because I have another session. So,
Okay.
so what I want to understand though, Nirmal, is like, so you're telling me about all this, and then how does this all feed into your current thinking right now in terms of what's been on your mind that?
Okay. Yeah, that's what I didn't get to quite. Okay, that's a big question to answer. Yeah, the relationship with the God, the God that's described, like, that I'm learning about from the Bible. That is one where, oh no, I'm gonna go to sleep. I don't want my phone to hang up. Right? Go to sleep. Okay. Where there's an avenue for healing. I don't. There's not enough time really to get into it right now, but that's what I'm learning about is that through those, there's an avenue for healing, and it's and I'm liking it. It's very much about love and respect and understanding and all the things that are good in life, and it doesn't involve a lot of like just accepting strange notions that are really like, or story elements that just don't make sense, and just looking the other way. I don't have to do any of that. You know, it's just a real story about real people doing real things. You know what I mean? Yeah, and there's a deep philosophy behind it that I'm learning. Yeah, without getting into all of the ideas of it, which have to do with healing, we can get into that another time. But they have to do with controlling your thoughts. That's the main thing. Is not necessarily controlling your thoughts, but being aware of them and being directing them in a certain way, so that not just with your own power, but depending on God to guide you and give you, and it actually works, and you actually can.
Being open to being guided.
Yes, and being able to hear and see things that as they happen around you, so that you're not necessarily always like just anticipating, you know, like a chaotic response, like an unknown reality. You're anticipating order. You're anticipating, you know, what's the word? Anticipating a good future, let's say, to whatever decision that you're making. So even with regards to pain, it goes all the way back to the first thing that I mentioned, which was having to do with how you talk about it, the words you use to describe what you're going through, and how there could be spiritual elements to it. How you could be not just, you know, by saying, "Oh, I hurt so bad, I can't," blah, 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 like talking like that. How you're giving in to a spiritual battle, which is defeating you, and how it, that's causing, it's kind of cementing your state of mind, which there's, I don't know, I'm learning about that, so I don't know how much that would be, like for instance, the alternative to that would be,
You don't have to describe it.
okay,
I do.
you
fully
get what I'm
understand
saying.
you.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and
I didn't hear you say anything.
No, it's okay. I'm just listening, but
Yeah.
and we have to kind of get ready to wrap up here. So, but
Yeah.
I fully understand what you're talking about, and I don't
Okay.
know exactly why, but in my personal life, it's come up, and I've understood these types of things too, not from the context of religion, not from the context of Christianity, but
Right, right.
because they also show up in health and healing
Absolutely.
knowledge and shared information, I guess. But
Yeah, everybody's
Yeah.
kind of becoming aware of these types of things, maybe going at it from different disciplines.
I'm wondering, because what I've seen is a pattern in our sessions where we start talking about, it's like oftentimes we're starting with the drugs you're taking, your experience of the pain, and then we're starting to get into that. You start actually experiencing more pain as we talk about
Yeah.
it. You start getting reactive and not wanting to talk about it, and then
Yeah.
I'm a little lost as to what else you're wanting to talk about. So what
Well,
I'm
no, I don't want to avoid the talking about it just because it hurts. I want to stop it from hurting when I talk about it. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah, it totally makes sense, and I know I think this does relate to what you brought up last time, which you were trying to explain to me, which was what you were learning from this particular, I think it was a Nigerian who was doing his YouTube videos, which, and he had some really good and interesting thoughts, and you kind of liked what he was teaching, which was based on the Bible, so.
I don't remember that. Yeah, but yeah, some different ones. One from Australia that I listened to, and another couple from the U.S. Couple people from the U.S. that specifically talk about healing now.
I'd love to hear about where your experiences of feeling guided. I'd like to hear about your experiences and awarenesses of being supported in whatever happens in your daily
Okay.
life. Yeah, and I'd love to hear about where that's pointing you to, and what results you're getting, and what maybe doesn't go as well as you would have thought it to go, etc.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like I think that's super important. Yeah.
It is.
So what I'm going to try and do too is I'm going to go back to those audio files and see if I can figure out how to send them to you.
Okay.
And what I'll do is I'm going to share the link to this session, so you'll be able to see it for, I think it's 60 days.
Okay.
And then it'll be gone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so I'm sorry the links didn't work. I think what happened is very shortly thereafter, a few days after, they expired.
I see.
The actual recordings get deleted.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
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 Okay, but we still have the audio as I mentioned, and I'll see if I can do anything with that.
Okay. That would be great. Thank you.
All right, Nirmal. So how do you want to keep going? I'll put up the invoice. I'll wait for you to pay it, and then
Okay.
once you've paid it, I'll just do that thing of giving you a call and seeing if you're interested in a Tuesday session in the
Okay.
afternoon.
Okay.
Okay, so
Sounds
no
good.
pressure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take it easy.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.
Okay.